you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Naruto Enters JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of kyugan on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Welcome to Konoha. Konoha, a small, unremarkable town with an exceptionally well-known hospital. Many aspiring medical pioneers venture here each year in search of new, more efficient methods of saving people's lives. It is also the home of one of the most highly valued nature reserves, a massive forest which lies to the back of the city, carefully walled off to prevent any damage to the local flora and fauna. Many people would question the sense in leaving such prime potential real estate unused, but the government had found little way to purchase it, since it was all owned by a highly respected group of individuals within the city itself, and they'd be damned if they were selling it. In fact, the last government lackey sent to offer them a deal returned with his briefcase around his neck and several important files shoved in a very uncomfortable place. As mentioned, being a hothouse for medical entrepreneurs, most of the city makes good use of the influx of medical students by selling and purchasing necessary goods, such as pharmaceuticals, vehicles, and the like. The city is divided into 4 areas, and each has their own points of interest. North Konoha, inhabited by the so-called upper class, boasts the finest schools and connections, most of the families having their hands in various parts of the city. South Konoha has the medical university, which most aspiring doctors aim towards. West Konoha, otherwise known as the tourist trap, is the location of the shopping arcades and various malls which keep the youths happy and preoccupied. And as for East Konoha, well, that's where our story begins. East Konoha, Nara Shikamaru sighed as he slumped against the window frame of the old abandoned warehouse, looking up at the sky lethargically. Man, those clouds got it lucky, he muttered, eyeing the fluffy white shapes float past. No school, no parents, no damn responsibilities. He sighed again as the sounds of violence below picked up, cries of pain and sickening crunches echoing within the rusted walls of the structure. Taking a peek at his watch, he raised an eyebrow. Mendoku's he tapped his knuckle against the wall, before looking down at the chaos below. Oi, we keep this up and we're gonna be late. A shriek of pain heralded a Yakuza member falling to the ground holding his bleeding nuts, a panting blonde twirling the steel pipe having done the deed. Yer tebayo, said blonde muttered, wiping sweat and blood out of his eyes with his free hand. You'd think these bastards would learn not to do this shit here. He smirked and kicked the prone Yakuza in the side, earning a whimper of pain. I catch you dealing drugs in this neighborhood again, I'll bust the other one, you hear? He asked, earning another whimper from the man. Glad we understand each other. And with that, he kicked the thug in the head, sending him into the blissful waters of unconsciousness. You really oughta lay off the gangs, you know. Shikamaru warned his blonde compatriot. Keep this up and you'll have a bounty on your head. A tap on his shoulder caused him to turn to the third member of their party, a large teen who was stuffing a handful of potato chips in his mouth. Too late for that. A voice called out, the Nara turning his head to find his best friend, Akamichi Chauji, munching on a rice ball as he flicked through a mobile phone he'd no doubt swiped from another thug. The guy in the corner had orders to take him out. No pictures though. Terrific, Shikamaru moaned, covering his face in exasperation. Not even out of high school, and already the gangs are after you. He glared over at his blonde compatriot, who was going through the wallets of the unconscious thugs. Oi, you hearing me, Naruto? The tall blonde stood up, turning his sunlight yellow hair to his friends and smirked, a childish what me worry expression that was the bane of many an instructor's existence. So we're famous? He asked, counting his plunder gleefully. Cool. Shikamaru sighed and reached into his pocket for the packet of aspirin he always carried with him, Chauji patting him sympathetically on the shoulder. Elsewhere, a bull-haired youth finished gargling out his mouth, checked his teeth one last time before bolting out of the bathroom. Pulling on a uniform shirt over his vest, he grabbed a book bag and dashed through the kitchen. Guy-sensei, I'll see you at school, he yelled, grabbing an energy drink from the counter on his way out. The youth's name is Rock Lee, a senior at East Konoha Gakuen. Due to his parents' untimely deaths, he was currently living with his foster father, Mato Guy, the gym teacher at his high school and owner of a private dojo. His grades were standard, and with the exception of his looks and his habit of always wearing his green tracksuit, he didn't really stand out in class academically. However, his open personality and respectful attitude made him popular with the staff, and his position as the star of the school track and karate teams almost guaranteed him a scholarship upon graduation. Finishing off his drink with a sigh before tossing it into a nearby trash can with the ease of long practice, the bowl-cut teen was about to resume his leisurely jog when he glanced down at his watch, eyes widening in alarm at just how late he was, only to stumble as the earth trembled. "I'm late," a voice yelled, Lee looking up in surprise even as civilians leapt for cover, the teen's eyes widening as a blonde blur rushed past him, almost toppling him over were it not for his quick reflexes. "Naruto-kun, Shikamaru-kun, Choji-kun," he wondered, recognizing the younger trio despite the impressive speeds they were moving at, his eyes widening as he spotted the blonde's wallet lying on the ground. "Ah, Naruto-kun," he called out, scooping the wallet up in his free hand. "Hold up." That was the last thing people around him heard before the teen tore down the street like a bat out of hell, leaving a veritable dust cloud in his wake. With Naruto. "God damn it, Shikamaru," Naruto yelled, his knees and elbows working like pistons as he tried to set a new land speed record for getting to school on time from the other side of town. "Why the hell didn't you tell me we were so late?" Shikamaru refused to answer, since he was focusing all his power into getting to the school gate before it shut, though he did shoot a few mental barbs at his thick-headed friend. Behind the two, the massive frame of Akamichi Choji lumbered along, attempting to keep up with his smaller friends. "Naruto-kun," a voice called out, a flash of green passing the panting Nara, who blinked at the sudden arrival of Rock Lee, the track star appearing at Naruto's elbow, keeping pace with the blonde quite easily much to Shikamaru's disbelief. "Lee-senpai," Naruto wondered, the blonde hellion blinking at the sight of the older teen. Though he didn't slow down for a second. "You late too? What happened? You spend too long warming up this morning." "I got a little carried away, yes," Lee admitted, not even looking winded as he matched the younger teen's ridiculous pace with ease that would have made Shikamaru roll his eyes in disgust if it weren't such a bother, "but that isn't important," he continued, holding up the blonde's wallet. "You dropped this when you bumped into me." "Oh crap," Naruto yelped, grabbing the wallet as he leapt over a fire hydrant. "Thanks, senpai, my lunch money's in there." He turned the corner to face the school, only for his eyes to bulge out of their sockets. Shit. The gate's shutting. Sure enough, the heavy iron gate was rolling shut, a rather bored-looking silver-haired teacher pushing it along. Though if you looked close enough you'd see the sick gleam in his eyes as he espied the tardy students. "Aw shit, Mizuki's at the gate," Naruto swore, the group somehow managing to move up a gear in their desperation to clear the gate, only for the man to deliberately speed up, his smirk growing all the while. "Damn it. He's gonna shut us out on purpose." With Mizuki grinned to himself as he espied the stragglers desperately trying to clear the gate. Being a teacher at a low-level school like this had few perks, but being a complete ass with your authority was one of them. Even Naruto, the #1 delinquent of the area, couldn't do anything if he was locked out. And if there was one thing the silver-haired prick loved, it was lording his authority over those who had no chance of doing anything about it. Just as he was reveling at the idea of having the so-called Hurricane King at his mercy, something rolled between the gates, causing the sadistic instructor to pause briefly in his surprise. While Lee, sure enough, Rock Lee, in a mad burst of speed, had somehow managed to dive through the narrowing gap in the barricade and, with the ease of long practice, perform a perfect forward roll, allowing him to land without much harm. "So one of the little brats made it," Mizuki muttered, his mocking grin returning as he eyed the stragglers. "That doesn't mean the others will." With that said, he pushed on the gate, determined to shut the little horrors out and lord it over them for the rest of the week, only to choke as the gate came to an abrupt halt, causing him to slam into the edge gut first, driving all the wind out of his lungs. "What the hell?" the instructor gasped, holding his gut as he collapsed onto his knees, his eyes widening as they landed on the handbrake for the gate, which had apparently moved into position, thus preventing the gate from moving when did. "How did that?" "Safe," a jubilant voice called out, Mizuki raising his head from the treacherous break to see that Naruto had made it through. The blonde hooligan's fists raised in the air as he crouched on the ground like a striker that had just scored the winning goal. "We made it." "No detention." Mendoku's Shikamaru gasped, the lazy good-for-nothing, as Mizuki liked to think of him, standing doubled over nearby, his hands gripping his knees to steady them as he tried to catch his breath that was way too close. "Tell me about it," Choji wheezed, the porker, as Mizuki so eloquently put it, lying on the ground like a beached whale, gasping for breath as he gazed at the sky. "Man, I hate running." He complained between gasps, "It always makes me hungry. Breathing makes you hungry." Naruto teased, a sentiment that Mizuki agreed with all too well, the blonde turning his attention over to Lee as the older teen got to his feet at last. "You okay, senpai? That was a pretty boss stunt you pulled back there." "I'm fine, Naruto-kun," Lee assured the teen, Mizuki glaring spitefully at the track star as he dusted off his uniform, looking none the worse for his tumble. "But Naruto-kun, won't you get in trouble for wearing that coat?" Naruto blinked before looking down at the unbuttoned school uniform coat. It was in an old-style one, designed to represent some outdated military tradition, and so swept down to the ankles. However, the sleeves had been rolled up, and the blonde preferred to leave the buttons undone, even in the rain. "Now, I get enough crap for wearing a headband," he muttered, tapping the aforementioned piece of cloth with a smirk, "and there ain't no one gonna separate me from this." "Hey, tough guy," Shikamaru called out, the Nara having already gone ahead with the still recovering Choji while the other two were chatting. "Hurry up or you're bailing your own ass out of the fire." Naruto yelped and dashed to catch up with his classmates, waving over his shoulder at Lee as he went. "See you at the dojo, senpai," he called out, before disappearing into the school doors, leaving Lee standing with Mizuki, who glared after the blonde even as he held his bruised chest. "Do you need some assistance, Mizuki-sensei?" Lee called out, the track star kneeling next to him, looking concerned. "Shall I take you to the nurse's office?" Mizuki feebly nodded a yes, allowing the track star to pull him to his feet and help him hobble to the infirmary, wincing every time one of his abused ribs popped from the movement. So caught up was he with his own pain that he failed to notice when a bandage unraveled itself from the brake handle, retreating back up Lee's sleeve like a serpent. Later, Yumino Iruka was, by all accounts, a fairly decent man. He lived alone in a bachelor apartment, was openly friendly and got along with just about everyone. He helped out around the apartment block, was willing to lend an ear towards some of his more unfortunate students, and even managed to put up with the random acts of violence people had come to expect in the East Side. However, if there ever was a bane to Iruka's nigh saintly patience, it was the blonde-haired youth sleeping with his feet up on the desk in the back row. "Naruto," the long-suffering educator roared, rearing back and hurling a chalk duster at the teen, sending him sprawling off his chair with a yelp amidst the raucous laughter of the class. "Pay attention in class." "Friggin' oh," Naruto swore, spitting out chalk dust as he rubbed his forehead where the eraser had hit, glaring sleepily at Iruka with one eye shut. "I thought it was against school rules for teachers to lay a hand on their students. Maybe if you actually learned something you could call yourself a student," Iruka muttered, earning a snicker from the surrounding classmates. "Besides, I never touched you with my hands. Now take your seat and pay attention. This will be on the exam." Naruto sighed and took his seat, ignoring the snickers from his peers as he listened half-heartedly to Iruka's lecture. It wasn't that he had something against the man. If anything, he and Iruka were the best of friends, seeing as the man went out of his way to keep an eye on the blonde since his parents passed away when he was only a year old, presumably due to the many gang wars that erupted from time to time on the East Side whenever members of the numerous Yakuza gangs that frequented the area looked at each other funny. Since nobody had come forward to claim Naruto, Iruka, who had lived just down the hall and was on good terms with the boy's parents, had opted to care for the boy, the two of them living together quite happily until he hit his teens, after which their relationship became decidedly more rocky. It wasn't that Naruto hated Iruka. Far from it. Even before his parents' death, the man had been like an older brother to him. He'd never struck him or hit him, well, no more than often. And even as a child, Naruto knew he'd done something to deserve the occasional bop across the bones. No, the reason things had gotten rocky between the two was because the fact that raising a child was expensive, and after becoming old enough to realize just how expensive it was, Naruto refused to have Iruka, who was living on a teacher's salary, pressure himself anymore when the blonde could beat down street punks for cash, something Iruka frowned upon heavily, as he didn't want Naruto growing up into the same kind of scum that had killed his parents. Naruto really didn't see what the problem was. Sure, he knew he was the furthest thing from a saint. He'd sent enough people to the hospital to prove that. But all of them had been the kind of scum that would beat up old ladies for their dentures or try to get grade schoolers to buy drugs even the most crazed addict would steer clear from, if only because they knew the assholes didn't know how to make it properly. Sure, he'd gotten hurt a few times, make that a lot of times, but the experience had made him tougher, smarter, and more resourceful than any amount of book earning could ever hope to accomplish. It also served the added bonus of cleaning up the streets of the East Side of what few stragglers remained following the recent reforms the police department were enforcing. Still, for all Iruka's nagging and Naruto's trash talk, the two cared for each other in a manner similar to father and son, though it would take a trained interrogation specialist to get Naruto to admit this out loud. He had a reputation to maintain after all. Naruto, Iruka's voice called out, snapping the blonde's attention back to the teacher, only to sweat drop at the look on the man's face, his features twitching with irritation as a vein twitching madly over his eye. Care to repeat what I just said? Naruto stammered, having missed every word of Iruka's explanation during his walk down memory lane. The blonde struggling to think of a way out of this mess without being yelled at, only to sag with relief as the bell sounded, announcing the arrival of lunch. "Catch you later, sensei," he yelled, leaping from his seat and making a mad dash for the door, almost bumping into Choji as the larger teen somehow crossed the distance between his desk and the door even faster than the blonde in his desire to chow down. "Naruto," Iruka roared, the rest of his class choosing to quietly sneak out behind him as he followed the pair out into the hallway, steam seething from his head as he glared after them in annoyance. "Get back here. Problems in paradise," a voice called out, Iruka turning with a frown to spot the amused features of Mitarashi Anko, the girl's PE instructor, as she sidled up beside him, drawing admiring looks from the male and some female students thanks to her figure. "Let me guess, everyone's favorite blonde hellraiser strikes again." "He's not that bad," Iruka sighed, shrugging his shoulders helplessly even as he massaged the bridge of his nose to suppress the now routine headache that seemed to follow in the wake of anything Naruto did. "I just wish he'd calm down a little and focus on his schoolwork instead of messing around." "Messing around?" Anko snorted, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed beneath her breasts. "Is that what they call having a rap sheet a mile long for fighting with various known members of the local gangs?" She smirked at Iruka's flinch. "Still, it's not like he didn't learn it from somewhere, right? You really shouldn't be going through the personnel files, Anko-san," Iruka muttered, unable to help chuckling slightly as he scratched the scar across his nose, a memento from his own tussles with gangsters in his youth. "They're private for a reason, you know. Please, we've known each other since we were kids. I didn't have to read shit," Anko countered, smirking at her scarred colleague. "And how many times I gotta tell you to drop the san? It makes me sound old." "I can't help that I was brought up with manners," Iruka countered, grunting slightly as she punched him in the arm. "And it's because I know what the gangs are like that I want Naruto to calm down," he muttered, making for the staff room. "So far he's limited himself to small fry, but those small fry work for someone. And at this rate he's going to end up making a name for himself as a troublemaker. Like father, like son, I guess," Anko mused, earning an embarrassed look from Iruka before he made his way towards the staff room, the PE instructor shaking her head in amusement as she made to follow him. "Still, it's a bit late for worries. After all, at this stage I doubt there's anyone who hasn't heard of the Hurricane King. East Konohagakuen roof. Man, Iruka-sensei really needs to get laid," Naruto muttered, popping a hole in the bottom of a can of soda with his penknife, before opening the top and downing the contents, hurling the empty can off the school roof with a belch. "I mean seriously, it's probably why he's so damn uptight all the time." "You think that's uptight? You should see my mom," Shikamaru muttered between bites of his sandwich. "She's always on my case. Never cuts me any slack no matter what I do. And if my grades drop by 1 point," he shivered at the memory. "Mendocuse. You shouldn't rag on your mom like that," Naruto chastised, a shadow flitting briefly across his features as he eyed the reclining Nara pointedly. "You're lucky to have her." Shikamaru said nothing, but turned his gaze heavenward, resuming his cloud watching from where he'd left off. Ignoring the sound of Choji put away a soba bread in 2 bites, the larger teen opening a packet of melon bread before he'd finished swallowing. "How in the hell can you eat so much of that stuff?" Naruto muttered, looking a little queasy as he watched the food disappear down his friend's throat like a black hole. "I mean, you're not even chewing. Don't you get sick?" "Drop it, Naruto," Shikamaru muttered, smirking to himself at the blonde's discomfort. "Choji once ate an entire shelf of sweets for a bet. You know better than anyone that when it comes to food, there's no stopping him." "Tell me about it," the blonde muttered, sweat dropping as he recalled the one time he'd gotten into a fight with the teen at the local yakiniku restaurant over the last piece of meat. "Took me a week to recover from that one," he muttered, shaking his head as Choji downed the melon bread in one go. "Hey, Uzumaki," the coarse voice called out, Naruto's brow twitching as his patented asshole detector went off, the blonde hellion turning to scowl at the door to the roof, which had just opened to reveal one of the East Konohagakuen's other, less lovable, delinquents. "Oshima," he muttered, eyeing the bleached punk as if he wasn't worth the time and effort it took to speak his name, which he certainly wasn't. Even as said punk sauntered across the road towards him. "The hell do you want now?" Oshima was known as one of those typical losers who was all into rebelling provided he could beat the tripe out of whomever he wanted. The guy was as ugly as sin and lacked the IQ of a suicidal lemming, in that he never seemed to learn no matter how hard he was smacked down. Rumor had it he transferred to East Konoha High after some other guy at his old school put him in hospital. When you gonna quit copying me and dye that piss-colored hair of yours black? Oshima demanded, bending over to look Naruto in the eyes whilst pointing at his own bleached locks, his lackey half-heartedly nodding behind him. You think you're cool copying me, huh? How many times I gotta tell you? Naruto muttered, restraining himself from crushing the can. This is my natural color. He shot the teen a look of disgust. And just who the hell are you accusing of copying? If I looked anything like you, I'd hang myself. He turned back to his lunch, waving his hand dismissively as he downed another soda piss of drag queen. I'm in no mood for you. Oshima's lackey turned an interesting shade of red as he tried to hold in his laughter, whilst Oshima himself turned an interesting shade of magenta. You're dead, the punk yelled, reaching his hand into his jacket pocket, only for his face to crumple in confusion. Oi, Oshima, Naruto called out, a smirk on his face as he continued to chug down his soda. If you're looking for those brass knuckles you're so proud of, they're in your back pocket. He smirked as Oshima blinked and patted his back pocket, the thug's eyes widening as he felt the familiar weapon through the fabric. Your next line will be, how do you know about my brass knuckles, you bastard? How do you know about my brass knuckles, you bastard? Oshima yelled, rounding on the blonde in anger, only for his mouth to gape open as Naruto words registered across his brain. Wait. How do you? I've fought enough Yakuza grunts to recognize the marks brass knuckles leave on a person's hand. Naruto explained with a smirk, and anyone with half a brain can tell from the stains on your shirt you've been using them recently. I doubt that's your blood. He pointed at the punk's leather jacket. Also, you normally carry them in your jacket, but you took it off to fight, since there isn't any blood on it. But once the fight was over you just put them in your back pocket. Shikamaru snorted as he eyed the two out the corner of his eyes, recognizing Naruto's patented breakdown technique. The reason no one had ever managed to beat the blonde in a one-on-one fight was because Naruto had mastered every single dirty trick in the book, and was a master of pulling the wool over someone's eyes. Poor fuck's walking right into it, he muttered, eyeing Oshima almost pityingly as Choji moved out of the way in order to watch the proceedings from a better angle, offering a chip to Shikamaru, who accepted it, munching down as they watched the performance unfold. Still, he was asking for it, dissing Naruto's hair like that. Your next line, Naruto taunted, the blonde crushing his can and tossing it to the side as he got to his feet, pointing at the punk with a smirk. What's your point, you little shit? What's your point, you little shit? Oshima yelled, lunging his fist towards the blonde's face with devastating force, Naruto's head snapping backwards as the fence behind him rattled from the impact. Got you, Oshima cackled, sweat dripping down his face. That's what you get for acting so damn cool. Where the hell are you punching? Naruto muttered, looking at the punk in disgust, completely unharmed. You really think you can pull one over me with that slow-ass brain of yours? He smirked and tilted his head down, allowing a horrified Oshima to see what he'd been punching. You weren't punching me, Naruto mocked. You were punching the fence behind me. Oshima shrieked and pulled his hand back as jagged bits of metal jabbed into his hand, tearing through muscle and skin, causing him to fall to the floor in a shivering mess. Bakayero, Naruto snorted, smirking down at the now whimpering punk. You still wanna piss around with me? Oshima scuttled away from the blonde, making a mad scramble for the door, assisted by his crony, who looked white with fear and a little green from the sight of Oshima's hand. I'll remember this, he half yelled, half whimpered, hobbling off to the infirmary with his injured hand clutched tightly in his other. Does he even listen to himself? Shikamaru muttered, the Nara shaking his head in exasperation as the door slammed behind the drama queen. Reject. Who the hell talks like that nowadays? Probably watched too many Super Sentai and Kamen Rider shows as a kid. Choji deduced, shaking a bag of crisps he'd recently emptied to search for survivors, before turning his attention to another packet, earning a snort from Naruto, the blonde leaning against the fence with a sigh, looking up at the clouds with a bored expression. There isn't any challenge here anymore, he thought to himself, just the same old brawls with the same old gangs and dickheads that think they own the place. He sighed again and closed his eyes, letting the breeze rustle his golden locks. Where's the freaking adventure? Meanwhile, Hyuga Hayashi looked over the contract again, before nodding his head and pulling out a pen from his suit pocket. Everything seems to be in order, he deduced, signing his name onto the piece of paper before handing it to the man across from him. I certainly expect great things from you, now that you're part of Hyuga Industries. But of course, Hyuga-sama, the older man offered, bowing to the Hyuga head, a tired yet relieved smile adorning his features once again. Thank you for your patronage. I was beginning to think I'd have to close down the business if aid didn't come soon. Think nothing of it, Hayashi stated crisply as he got to his feet. I shall expect good news at the next meeting. He turned his head slightly to the girl sitting in the chair beside him. Let's go. The girl sat up, obviously startled at being addressed, before stuttering out a brief affirmation and getting to her feet. A young man in a school uniform, standing by the door holding the door open for the pair, his long black hair hanging down to his back as he bowed slightly. "Your children?" the old man asked, eyeing the two carefully, earning a brief nod from the Hyuga head as the teen escorted the girl out into the hallway, holding the door open for the elder Hyuga. "My eldest daughter and nephew," Hayashi responded, fixing his tie even as he nodded towards the boy, who took this as his call to go on ahead. "I believe it's time they see just how the family business is run. Keeping it within the family." The old man nodded approvingly, glancing towards his desk, where a photo depicting his own family lay framed. "If only my offspring were as dutiful as your own. Would that were true for all progeny," Hayashi responded, before bowing respectfully and going out the door. In the hallway, he nodded to the bodyguards assembled and looked to his daughter. "I am heading back to the manor," he stated, causing her to flinch. "Are you coming or do you wish to look around?" Hyuga Hinata nodded, earning a sigh from her father, who turned to her elder cousin. "Watch over her, Neji," he ordered, his tone brooking no arguments. "I expect both of you back at the mansion before curfew." "But of course, Hayashi-sama," Neji replied with a bow, watching as the man departed with half the bodyguards before turning to his cousin. "Hinata-sama, shall we go?" he asked, his tone civil, though devoid of warmth, a fact that was not missed by Hinata, who flinched as he placed a hand on her shoulder, allowing him to lead her out the door and into the sunlight. "I don't see the reasoning in wanting to stay in a place like this," Neji muttered, eyeing the streets with a form of contempt. "It doesn't even have any decent points of interest." But Hinata began, stuttering nervously as she tried to avoid meeting her elder cousin's eyes, clutching her school bag to her chest. "It's a change from staying in the M manor all the tea time," she stammered, only to flinch as Neji turned to look her in the eye. "Pitiful," he muttered, mild annoyance lining his tone even as he maintained his calm facade. "Can't you even look someone in the eye without flinching? You're next in line to lead the Hyuga family. Get your act together." Hinata flinched, averting her eyes from her cousin's unforgiving stare, the tightening of her grip on her bag the only warning Neji and the bodyguards had before the distraught girl took off, racing down the street and out of sight before anyone could think to stop her. "Hinata-sama," Neji called out, wondering if, just maybe, he'd pushed too hard, only to swear as the bodyguards continued to stand around like idiots. "What are you waiting for?" he demanded, slapping one upside the head. "Don't just stand there gawping." "After her, East Konoha Gakuen. Wanna hit the arcade on the way home?" Naruto asked, book bag held over his shoulder and hand in his coat pocket as he walked out the school gate alongside Shikamaru and Choji, classes having finished for the day. "Can't," Shikamaru muttered, sighing as he slouched along like he was half asleep. "My mom's expecting me back at the shop. If I'm late by so much as a second, she'll start nagging again." He sighed and shook his head. "Mendocuse, why do I have to do this?" "Me too," Choji muttered between bites of BBQ flavor crisps, patting the lazy teen on the shoulder comfortingly, knowing how bad Mrs. Nara could be when it came to Shikamaru's procrastinating dads expecting me to help out at the store. "Man, if they weren't your parents, I'd say you guys were whipped." Naruto cackled, grinning like a fox as he dodged the lazy swipe Shikamaru took at him, though he needn't have bothered, as the Nara didn't really put much effort into it. "Too slow. You'll never catch oomph." Shikamaru blinked, actually straightening somewhat as a blue-haired blur rammed into Naruto, sending the blonde sprawling across the sidewalk in a tangle of limbs and curses. "A truck would have been more satisfying," he remarked snidely, before turning to get a better look at whatever had run Naruto over, knowing that he'd have to step in to keep the poor sucker from being beaten to a pulp, only to quirk a brow at the sight of the girl currently straddling his friend's lap. "Whoa, that's a rare beauty there," he muttered, taking in her long black hair and the pearl-white skin, a faint blush adorning his features as he averted his eyes from her shapely hips, evident from her skirt, and ample bosom, which was oh so apparent despite the best efforts of her school jersey. The Nara's eyes narrowing as he espied the crest adorning her collar. "Wait a minute. Isn't that a North Konoha Gakuen uniform? What's an uptown girl doing here?" Naruto's POV. "Friggin' oh," Naruto hissed, the blonde trying to push himself up of the ground, only to find himself incapable of moving as a result of someone sitting on him, something the blonde intended to rectify all too soon the moment he could see straight. "All right. Who the hell?" He trailed off as he realized two things. One, his assaulted was a girl, and as much as Naruto admitted to being a punk, even reveled in it, even he drew the line at hitting girls unless they hit first. Two, this girl was quite possibly the cutest he'd ever seen. Blue eyes gazed into pearl white, seconds seemingly giving way to minutes. Naruto was even willing to bet he heard that stereotypical first meeting music that most anime reserved for moments like this playing in the background. only to blink as he realized it was coming from the girl's bag, reality snapping back as the two of them blushed. The full extent of the compromising situation they were currently in finally dawning in their minds. "I'm so sorry," the girl stammered, scrambling to her feet in a hurry, dusting herself down and bowing to the blonde, Naruto quickly following suit as she ducked down to scoop up her bag. No, my bad," Naruto muttered, the blonde scratching his head awkwardly, looking round desperately to make sure no one saw what happened, deciding it wasn't worth the effort to murder Choji. "Shikamaru and that blasted cat Tora from down the street," only to blink as the girl pulled a cell phone out of her bag, her eyes widening in alarm as she read the text message she'd received. Are you alright, miss? Hinata-sama," an annoyed voice yelled out, Naruto looking up to see a long-haired teen in a North Konohagakuin boys' school uniform racing towards them. His features, which the blonde noticed bore a marked resemblance to the girl's, especially the eyes, lined with anger. "Hold it right there." Hinata's POV. Hinata paled at the sound of her cousin's irate voice, her earlier embarrassment replaced with fear as she cursed herself for not turning off her phone, knowing all too well that her bodyguards were more than capable of using it to keep track of her. Stammering out a quick apology to the, admittedly cute, boy she'd inadvertently run over during her escape, the Hyuga heiress promptly hugged her bag to her chest and dashed across the street, wanting to put as much distance between her and her cousin as possibly, not out of fear for the older teen. For despite his cold words, Neji had never raised a hand to her, but out of a desire to maintain this limited window of freedom she'd gained by giving him the slip. So intent was the girl in avoiding her entourage, however, that she failed to notice the looks of alarm on her cousin's face as she raced across the street, the honking of a car's horn drawing her attention to the road, her eyes widening as she realized the lights were green, a speeding convertible racing right towards her, the driver drinking from a bottle with his head back. "I'm going to die," she realized, her eyes closing as she braced for the inevitable impact that would end her short life. "I'm sorry, Hanabi-chan." Something rammed into her side, Hinata letting out a gasp as she was sent sprawling across the ground, the convertible screeching past her like a force of nature. A sickening thud followed by the sound of screeching brakes sounding behind as she lay on the ground, winded but alive. "I'm alive," she realized, fighting down the pain in her side as she pushed herself up onto her knees, opening her eyes in time to see the driver of the convertible hop back into his car with a panicked expression, driving off despite people's attempts to stop him. And her eyes, it was to see a car careening away, people yelling at it to stop. What happened? She wondered, looking around in confusion. "How did I?" She trailed off as something caught her eyes, something that made her heart skip a beat and her blood run cold, both hands coming up to cover her mouth even as Neji ran up beside her, his voice distant, as if coming from the end of a tunnel. "No." Shikamaru's POV. Mendoku Shikamaru swore as he pulled himself to his feet, having been tossed aside by some muscled suit and sunglasses bodyguard. "The hell's the fire?" he demanded, wincing as his body protested the rough treatment, only to blink as he espied a crowd gathering nearby. There'd been an accident, he wondered, pushing through the crowd using his elbows and shins to make a path, Choji following in his wake. "Yo, Naruto," he called out, trying to spot the blonde hellion in the crowd. "Where are you, man?" He finally reached the road, and the sight that lay before him made him stop in his tracks. There was a massive bloodstain on the road, and tire tracks showing how the speeding car had simply tore off after the accident. Several suited heavies were handling crowd control, not letting the public get too close as someone got the license plate of the car and another called the authorities. The girl from earlier was kneeling next to a prone form that was lying face up in the growing pool of blood, a look of hysterical fear on her face as she tried to make the victim respond. "It can't be," Shikamaru whispered, falling to his knees in shock. "No way, it can't be." The wind picked up, causing the victim's bloodied, golden locks to rustle, the once bright blue eyes dull and empty as they gazed up at the sky. Naruto. Darkness, that's what this was. Darkness, so cold, so quiet, so painless. "Well, this sucks," Naruto muttered, the last, so far as he knew, Uzumaki drifting helplessly in the sea of darkness, unable to so much as blink. "I risk my life to save some cutie, and I don't live long enough to get her name." The teen's voice echoed around the darkness, only to die out within seconds, making him even more depressed. "Okay, this sure ain't heaven," he deduced, "otherwise I'd be up to my ears in ramen with a plethora of Megumi-class beauties offering to feed it to me." He snorted, "And it sure ain't hell, otherwise I'd be chained to a rock while some fat-ass demon scarfs away at ramen only to chuck it away half done." He twitched, limbs sprawled out at his sides limply, incapable of movement. He tried moving his pinky, only to find the task as impossible as wrestling the last chip away from Chaoji. Damn it, he cursed, closing his eyes bitterly. Okay, I'll admit I wasn't the best kid out there. Have I got into fights more times than I should have, sent people to hospital, traumatized more staff members than its salary cut, but I at least deserve to know where the heck I am. He eyed the darkness and annoyance. Yo God, or Satan, or whoever's in charge here. How about switching on the damn lights? Abruptly, there was an explosion of light, blinding the startled teen and causing intense pain to surge through his body, a silent scream tearing from his lips. Within an instant, the pain lessened to a dull ache, though the intensity of the light didn't change in the slightest. Sanuva, Naruto whimpered, eyes clamped shut against the light. You think you're so damn funny, don't ya? The delinquent frowned as the light seemed to dim slightly, only to flinch as what appeared to be a pair of slender arms wrapped around him. Opening his eyes a crack to see what the hell was going on, the blonde found himself gaping in surprise at the winged figure that was enveloping him in a lover's embrace. No way, he whispered, staring at the wings in shock, only for the light to grow brighter as the kind, gentle eyes looked into his own. Shikamaru's POV. Nara Shikamaru, age 15, was currently in the midst of having a nervous breakdown. One of his best friends' greatest pain in his ass had just been involved in a hit and run, having acted like some sort of hero and pushed the blue-haired girl out of the way of the car. The last the lazy teen had seen of Naruto, he'd been piled into a waiting ambulance and driven off to Konoha Hospital. But judging from the sheer force of the collision, and the fact someone had seen Naruto's body fly 8 feet through the air before landing on his neck, things weren't looking good. Nara was currently sitting in the waiting room of the hospital, twiddling his thumbs in concern as he waited for the doctors to come back with the report. Next to him sat Chaoji, the giant teen, for once not stuffing his face, as he was too worried to stomach anything. That, and the smell of the disinfectants were making the larger teen sick. Across from them sat a worried Yumino Uruka, who had his head in his hands, his hair in disarray as he muttered indecipherably to himself. The instructor had looked like he was about to faint at the inclusion of car crash and Naruto in the same sentence, only to shove the 2 students into his car and bolt up to the hospital after a moment's hesitation. Now whatever adrenaline had been pumping through his system had run out, causing him to revert to a nervous wreck. It's inconceivable, a voice insisted, the group looking up as several doctors came into the hall, looking absolutely baffled as they argued with one another. One of them pointing at an X-ray photo as if it had personally insulted him. It's as if the accident never happened. But what about the blood loss? Another queried, checking her notes, her lips pursed as she tried to make sense of what she was reading. According to this, he lost almost 2 liters of it just lying on the street. Then there's the lack of damage to the muscle tissue. Another cut in. From a blow like that you'd expect at least severe tearing of the muscles or bruising. So far there's no sign of anything more than a concussion. Doctors, Uruka called out, catching their attention. How's Naruto? The doctors blinked, before looking at each other, one of them stepping forward. Are you referring to Uzumaki Naruto? She asked, looking the instructor up and down. Yes, I'm his guardian, Uruka replied, wringing his hands in concern. Is he going to be all right? Shikamaru frowned as he noticed how the doctors were acting suspiciously, muttering to themselves as they compared notes. The one in front, who was apparently the unofficial spokeswoman, nodded. From what we can tell, he'll live, she relayed, cool as ice, but we'll need to run some tests first. Tests? Uruka stammered, looking worried as he grabbed her shoulders. What kind of tests? How badly hurt is he? The doctor frowned at the man's emotional actions. Simply procedure, she assured him, removing his hands with a firm grip. Now if you'll excuse us. Hold it, Shikamaru called out, hands in his pockets as he eyed the doctors. Just what kind of tests are you planning there? He asked. I highly doubt they're part of the normal procedure. The doctor scowled over the rim of her glasses at the teen. And just what would a brat like you know about hospital procedures? She drawled, with an air of superiority. Enough to know, gather from your conversation earlier, that there's nothing physically wrong with my friend. Shikamaru shot back, causing the doctors as a whole to flinch. You were going on about how there seemed to be no injuries or even signs of damage outside of blood loss, he stated, pointing at the group. But when Uruka-sensei mentioned Naruto's name, you all instantly clammed up. That leads me to believe you were talking about Naruto, but didn't want to give out too much info. Uruka looked between the suddenly nervous doctors and the accusing Shikamaru, unable to comprehend what he was seeing, whilst Chaoji climbed to his feet, towering behind his friend in case trouble started. Another thing, Shikamaru pointed out, when Uruka-sensei asked you about Naruto's welfare, you showed virtually no emotion. Hardly what one would expect from someone concerned with the mental state of a concerned friend or family member. He looked over at the doctors, who were starting to feel uncomfortable with the teen's stare, which carried the weight of years he hadn't attained yet. Which leads to the following conclusion: not only is Naruto alive and unharmed, but you lot haven't the foggiest how he got that way, and so want to experiment on him to find out why. The doctors flinched as Iruka looked between them and his student. All the proof the instructor needed as his visage slowly changed from one of shock to one of pure, unbridled fury. "You monsters," he yelled, advancing on them like some wrathful thunderbolt-wielding deity. "You call yourselves doctors. How can you even think of taking advantage of a patient like that?" But the advantages to medical science one began, only for his female colleague to elbow him in the teeth. "Medical science," Iruka roared, causing everyone within range to wince and setting off all the babies in the infirmary. "You bastards. He isn't some lab sample for you to stick under a microscope. He's a human being." The doctors continued to flinch, before suddenly growing more serious and looking over the man's shoulder. Iruka hazarded a look, only to see 3 massive orderlies looming behind him. "Visiting hours are over," the female doctor replied smugly. "Gentlemen, kindly see these people out." The lead orderly nodded and grabbed Iruka by the arm, the teacher struggling all the while, another placing a hand on Chaoji's shoulder. "Come on, lardass," he muttered, only to be sent flying down the hall, teeth trailing after him as a fist the size of a small ham rammed into his mouth. "Who are you calling fat, you pissants?" the suddenly irate teen bellowed, hair spikier and eyes pupil-less with rage. "Care to repeat those words?" As Chaoji goes berserk, Shikamaru moaned and covered his face, stepping to the side in preparation for what was coming. "Big mistake," he muttered, eyeing the remaining orderlies almost pityingly. "Should have just kept your mouths shut." Iruka watched in mute horror as Chaoji tore into the orderlies, sending the chairs and trash bins flying as the scuffle carried on. The doctors having done a runner, Shikamaru tapped the man on the shoulder, indicating the hallway the staff had come from. "Let's get going," the lazy genius muttered, nodding at Chaoji. "He can handle himself," he assured Iruka. "Even Naruto knows better than to call Chaoji fat." "Who's fat?" Chaoji roared, ramming an orderly into the wall repeatedly. "I heard that word again." "Was it you?" Iruka's sweat dropped at the sight, before nodding at Shikamaru. "Dully, point taken," he muttered, the two of them dashing off, leaving Chaoji to finish off the orderlies. They tore down the hallway, ducking out of sight when more orderlies showed up, some with stun guns, cattle prods and, in one case, full riot gear, before finally coming to the recovery rooms. Shikamaru opened the door slightly, grinning as he espied Naruto's familiar ugly mug, before blinking in shock at the sight of the girl from before lying with her head on the unconscious blonde's stomach. "Why's she here?" he wondered, before recalling what happened. "Right, she went with him in the ambulance, guess they let her stay." Opening the door a crack, he snuck in, followed closely by Iruka. The two looked from the unconscious Naruto to the equally unconscious girl, Iruka breaking into a feeble grin. "And me without my camera," the older man joked, shaking his head at how adorable they looked, though he felt immensely relieved at the steady pulse on Naruto's heart monitor. Shikamaru merely grunted in agreement, before reaching out to shake the girl's shoulder, hoping to find out just who she was. As soon as he touched her shoulder, however, a light exploded behind his eyes, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. "Shikamaru," Iruka yelled, only to yelp as an orderly flew down the hall. "Everything all right in here, sensei?" Chaoji wondered, the massive teen growling in annoyance as he stuck his head into the room, his uniform shirt torn in several places from his tussle with the orderlies, only to blink as he spotted the comatose form of Shikamaru and frowned. "What happened?" he asked, looking around for any traps as he stepped in, closing the door behind him. All he did was touch her and he fell over," Iruka insisted, wondering if this was all some weird dream, pinching himself, only adding to his discomfort as he tried to rouse Shikamaru. Chaoji looked at his sensei in confusion before the door burst open, causing him to spin round, only for 3 tranquilizer darts to ram into his chest, sending him stumbling back, hitting his head against the girl's leg and rendering himself unconscious. "Yay!" the girl yelped, looking around in shock as she came to her senses, letting out a gasp at the 2 boys on the floor, her eyes widening at the sight of Iruka being tackled by another orderly with a taser. "What's going on?" Hyuga-sama, the female doctor from before, called out, pushing up her glasses as she stood between 2 armed orderlies. "Please step out of the room. Visiting hours are over, and your father has sent an escort to take you home." She scowled at the unconscious forms of Shikamaru and Chaoji. "Get those troublemakers out of here." The orderlies grunted in acknowledgement, one of them grabbing Shikamaru's prone form while the other kicked the comatose Chaoji in the stomach. Think you're so tough, do ya? He spat, a massive shiner covering his face. Learn your place, you fat piece of shit. Stop it. The girl, the Hyuga Aruka called out, the educator opening one eye just in time to see her grab the orderly's arm, her features lined with distress at his cruelty. Don't hurt him. Shut up. The orderly yelled, tossing her aside with a backhand, earning a sharp reprimand from the female doctor that was soundly ignored. This fat shit had it coming to high oomph. Whatever the orderly had been about to say ended when a foot rammed into his mouth with the force of a pile driver, sending him flying out of the room, collapsing on top of the female doctor. The imprint of the foot embedded in his face as an annoyed grumble filled the stunned silence. Too damn noisy, Naruto growled, rubbing his eyes with his fists as he released a jaw-cracking yawn. Can't a guy get some sleep without pissants like you waking me up every time? He opened his eyes to glare at his surroundings, Aruka unable to help the shiver that raced up his spine that had nothing to do with his recent tasering, and everything to do with the growing look of growing irritation in the blonde's bloodshot blue eyes as he took in the prone form of his friends, his own shocked state, and the way the Hyuga girl was holding her reddening cheek. My head hurts like a bitch, the teen muttered, getting out of the bed, the remaining orderlies taking a cautious step backwards. My stomach feels like it's running on empty. I've got aches and pains in places I'd rather not mention, and now I wake up to find you self-important bastards not only beating up my friends, but even going so far as to hit a girl. He pushed his hair up with one hand, glaring at the scared orderlies with his one visible eye, the pupil having narrowed into an animalistic slit. Big mistake. Aruka sighed, lying flat on the floor as the sounds of carnage began, shaking his head ruefully as he tried not to think about the complaints he'd have to deal with from the hospital directors. At the very least he's okay, he reasoned, a smile of relief adorning his twitching features, though it was soon replaced with grimace as Naruto got creative with a nearby IV stand. That was so not meant to be used like that, he muttered, wishing he could cover his ears to block out the distressed orderly's screams. Later, Ikaraku ramen stand. Naruto sighed as he finished his 15th bowl of ramen, placing the bowl down with a satisfied gasp. "Ah, that was perfect," he praised, grinning cheekily at the waitress of the stand, who flushed. "How about another bowl, Ni-chan? You trying to drive me into debt?" Aruka demanded, though on the inside he was relieved to see that nothing had changed with the blonde, and especially glad that he'd gotten the kid out of the hospital before the police showed up. Needless to say, following his revival, Naruto had gone on a rampage in the hospital, sending orderlies and equipment flying as he tore through them like a humanoid typhoon. It was only thanks to a well-timed yell and the sound of police sirens that the instructor had managed to get the hellion out of the building, and even then he suspected it was only to save their own hides that the doctors hadn't reported them. Still, the instructor muttered, fiddling with chopsticks to even think they'd act like that. He eyed Naruto out the corner of his eye, though in a way, I can relate to them. Just how did Naruto recover so fast? Jesus Christ, Naruto, Shikamaru muttered, eyeing the blonde with mild disgust as he put away his 20th bowl of ramen. You'd think being hit by a car would put a dent in your appetite. Wait, what? Exclaimed the father-daughter pair, looking up in alarm at the teen's words. Oh my god, Naruto-kun, are you alright? She asked, putting her hand to his head, patting him over to search for injuries. Are you sure you should be out yet? Relax, Ni-chan, I'm fine, Naruto assured her, grinning foxily at the older girl as he flexed a muscle to prove his point. Nothing's gonna keep me away from my ramen, he boasted, peering over the girl's shoulder at her father. In fact, how about another bowl? Now that's my favorite customer. Chuchai laughed, ignoring the sigh from his daughter as he dished out another massive helping, placing the bowl in front of the blonde with a smirk. Here you go, this one's on the house. Yada, Naruto cheered, little hearts adorning his eyes as he clapped his hands together in glee, earning a giggle from and a snort of amusement from everyone else. You rock, old man. Just for that I'm taking it back, Chuchai muttered, whisking the bowl away just as Naruto was about to dig in, the stern look that adorned his features belying the teasing glint in his eyes as he pretended to walk away with the liquid nirvana. Og, no, Naruto whined, reaching desperately over the counter. My ramen ch1. Aruka merely sighed and shook his head, glad that, at the very least, Naruto's skull had apparently been thick enough to prevent any further damage from the crash. Hyuga Manor, Hayashi's office. Hayashi looked at his daughter from behind a thick, oak desk, several important papers lying in ordered stacks before him. The head of the family had just received a detailed report on his daughter's little unauthorized stunt, and was far from pleased. Behind the girl, her cousin, Neji, stood at attention, his face decidedly neutral, though the highly tangible aura of anger could be felt by Hayashi even from across the desk. What have you to say for yourselves? Hayashi asked, tone calm but serious as a heart attack. You are aware that a person almost lost their life and that I have expended a great deal of effort to have the matter hushed up. It's my fault, Hayashi-sama, Neji insisted, bowing his head to his uncle in apology before Hinata could speak up. I was lax in my duties as Hinata-sama's escort. It shall not happen again. Hayashi looked his nephew over before nodding his head. See that it doesn't, he instructed, nodding towards the door as an act of dismissal, watching the elder teen as he turned on his heel and marched out of the room, only turning his attention to his daughter the moment the door closed behind him. You disobeyed my order not to use that, he stated, causing the timid girl to flinch. I am sorry, Hinata stammered, wishing she could just find a rock to crawl under. I know it is forbidden, but the boy wouldn't have been hurt if I hadn't run away. She gripped her dirtied skirt between her fingers, and no one could see it anyway. That is not the issue, Hayashi cut in, pausing at the girl's flinch, deciding to moderate his tone somewhat. You know better than anyone that using that is like setting off a silent alarm to the right people. Just because it doesn't look like anyone noticed, doesn't mean they aren't biding their time. Hinata flinched and looked away, blinking as her father sighed, standing up from his desk and facing the window. You're excused, Hinata, he stated. Hand your uniform to the servants and they'll patch it up for you. Hayashi waited until he heard the door shut behind her, before turning back to a report he'd gathered concerning the incident. Uzumaki, he wondered, eyeing the delinquent's photo with an almost bemused air. A coincidence? Maybe then again. The next day, I'm late, Naruto yelled, charging down the street, Shikamaru and Choji panting as they tried to keep up. Shit, why the hell did I forget to set the alarm? He swore if you guys hadn't shown up when you did. He trailed off as he rounded a corner, leapfrogging over an old woman purifying the sidewalk, narrowly avoiding a ladle to the bells in the process. Late again, Naruto-kun, Lee's voice called out, the older teen pulling up alongside the blonde, a sports bag over one shoulder as he matched the pace effortlessly. Much to Shikamaru's derision, this is becoming a bad habit. Blame Iruka-sensei, Naruto muttered, his teeth clenched. He probably figured I needed to rest up after he trailed off, not wanting to think about the car crash if he could help it, instead eyeing the older teen's track bag. Hey senpai, you got a track meet today, right? Good luck, not that you'll need it. It never pays to be overconfident, Naruto-kun, though thank you all the same, Lee offered, smiling at the younger teen before turning his attention back to the front as they neared the school gates. It would appear we're in luck. Aoba-sensei is on the gate today. Thank God for small mercies, Naruto muttered, breathing a sigh of relief, for while Aoba came off as the serious type with those sunglasses of his, the goatee sporting instructor was actually one of the more lenient staff members, and an apparent riot if you got him drunk in the vicinity of a lampshade. Race you to the gate, senpai. Yosh, Lee grinned, the two of them picking up the pace for the final stretch, racing past the gate and Aoba, who merely tapped his watch and thumbed in the direction of the school building as he waved them through. Best get to class quickly, you three, he called out to the trio, who paused in saying their farewells to Lee as the elder teen raced off to the track field. Iruka told me if you kept him waiting he'd call on you in class. You heard the man, Shikamaru. Naruto grinned, racing up the steps to the building, startling a few first years that were lounging around as better not doze off in class. Hard to believe he was in a car accident just the other day, Shikamaru muttered, earning a look of shock from Aoba. Never mind, sensei, you'd just give yourself an aneurysm, he remarked, catching his breath and following Choji into the building. East Konoha staff room. Mizuki scowled as he looked out the staff room window, where the view of the courtyard allowed him the perfect view to spy on whoever turned up late. He grit his teeth as he watched Naruto saunter up the steps like he owned the place, ribs twinging at the memory of the injury he'd received from the gate. Like a cockroach, he muttered, eyeing the delinquent with distaste, just won't stay dead. He eyed the bane of his existence with an annoyed glare, curling his fists in anger. I don't know how you survived that crash, Uzumaki, but I'll damn well rid myself of you yet. Gym class. Naruto let out a yell as he slammed the ball into the basket, heralding a shrill whistle from the coach. Yosh, Guy yelled, making a T with his hands. Halftime. Try not to cool down too much or you'll cramp up. You got it, sensei, Naruto called out, wiping himself down with a towel as he plunked himself down on the bench, grinning at the exhausted form of Shikamaru as the Nara lay prone on his back. What's up, Shikamaru? He teased. Not winded, are we? Shut up, Shikamaru moaned, giving the far too cheerful blonde the finger as he struggled to draw air into his lungs whilst fighting down a stitch. Not all of us are stamina freaks like you, Naruto. You're just lazy. Naruto shot back teasingly, nudging the down Nara with his elbow and earning a swipe to the arm for his trouble. Come on, man. Lighten up. You know they won't like you if you laze around all the time. Like I care about something as troublesome as being popular with girls. Shikamaru snorted, cracking one eye open to level a bored look in his friend's direction. Besides, I have it on good authority that girls don't like bleached idiots with the maturity of a 5-year-old either. My heart, Naruto cried out, clutching a hand over his chest dramatically, as if he'd been stabbed. You pierced it, foul fiend, he proclaimed, before keeling over onto his side, Shikamaru squawking indignantly as the blonde landed on top of him. Knock it off, you idiot. The Nara swore, struggling to push the larger, heavier teen off him, glaring pointedly at the blonde as Naruto backed off, snickering like a hyena even as people eyed them oddly. God damn it, teach me to worry about you again. You're not my type anyway. Naruto scoffed, dodging a kick from the irate Nara only to blink as he spotted Guy-sensei walking towards him. The male gym coach dressed in a green tracksuit almost identical to Lee's. Yo, Guy-sensei, everything alright? Perfectly fine, Naruto-kun, Guy assured the blonde, grinning confidently as he gave the teen a thumbs up, Shikamaru cursing as the light shining off the man's impressive teeth blinded the Nara. Actually, I heard about the accident the other day and wanted to make sure everything was alright with you. You haven't been experiencing any problems since being discharged from the hospital, have you? I wouldn't so much call it discharged so much as kicked out, Naruto muttered, chuckling to himself as he recalled the mess he'd left behind even as he grinned at Lee's guardian. Relax, sensei, he assured the man, proceeding to box on the spot to prove how fit he was. All that idiot did was knock the wind out of me. That's good, Guy sighed, ruffling the blonde's hair much to Naruto's annoyance, before clapping a hand on the teen's shoulders, almost sending him face first into the ground. For a moment there I thought I'd lost one of my youthful students. He blinked suddenly, tapping his fist into his palm. That reminds me. Would you mind coming with me for a moment, Naruto-kun? There's something I need your help with. No problem, Naruto assured the man, turning to look at Shikamaru only to scoff to find the Nara had resumed his prone position on the bench, his eyes closed and his head resting on his arms. Though if it's to try and get me to join the track team again, let me come right out and say I'm still not interested. Oh no, it's nothing like that, Guy assured him, calling out to one of the nearby assistants to cover for him while he led the blonde out the back. Though I do think you're wasting your talents, and Lee-kun could use a good running partner. Sensei, even I know that Lee-senpai holds back during our races, Naruto countered, smirking good-naturedly as he fell into step behind the man. The two of them walking to the back of the gym, which had a bird's eye view of the track field, where Lee was currently leading the pack by a wide margin. Besides, you and I both know senpai's wasting his talents in a place like this. Naruto, Guy spoke up, Naruto turning to face the man only to blink at the expression on the normally robust man's face, his eyes, usually filled with good-natured mirth, deadly serious. What really happened yesterday? He demanded, his tone brooking no argument. I was there when they carted you off in the ambulance. I saw the amount of blood you lost. Blood? Naruto repeated, staring at the man in confusion, wondering what in the world he was talking about, only to blink as the man somehow pulled a 2-liter bottle of water out of thin air, promptly emptying it on the ground between them in a wide area. By the time the ambulance arrived, you'd already lost at least 2 liters of blood just lying there on the ground, Guy informed the teen, tossing the now empty bottle over his shoulder into a nearby bin. Naruto's blood running cold as he gaped at the stain on the ground. It's a miracle you're even alive right now. Never mind standing right in front of me as if nothing happened at all. He regarded the stunned teen solemnly. Can you recall anything that might have happened after the accident? Anything at all? Naruto shivered, sweat dripping down his forehead as he tried to simultaneously recall what happened and instinctively block out the memory. He could dimly recall how his body had sailed through the air after slamming into the bonnet of the car, how everything had seemed to flow past him, before his head connected with the asphalt. He remembered lying broken, unable of even moving a finger, struggling to even breathe as the feeling left his limbs. He remembered small hands, trembling with fear, reaching out to cup his cooling cheeks, and a pair of terrified white eyes gazing into his as the darkness closed in. I remember a light, he stated finally, his trembling subsiding somewhat as the memory of the dream he'd had in the hospital returned to him. A strange feeling of warmth and longing rushing through him as he recalled that warm embrace. A warm, gentle light. It brought me back. A warm light, Guy repeated, his expression unreadable as he rubbed his chin with one hand, the other supporting his elbow. And other than this, you recall nothing between the crash and the hospital? He sighed as Naruto shrugged dismissively, before smiling and patting the blonde on the shoulder. I am sorry to bring it up, but Lee and I were really worried. Think nothing of it, sensei, Naruto assured the man, glad to see the unnaturally serious expression finally leave his face. After all the scraps I've been getting into, it'll take more than a car to take me out. That reminds me, Guy exclaimed, his expression turning comically serious as he pointed at the teen dramatically. What's this I hear about you using your martial arts training to pick fights with Yakuza thugs? He demanded, only to blink at the Naruto-shaped hole in the air, the blonde having scarpered the moment he'd started posing Naruto-kun. He roared, racing after the blonde. Come back here and accept your youthful punishment like a man. Elsewhere, that should be more than enough, Mizuki noted, smirking as he eyed the hoard of stolen items he'd pilfered from Naruto's homeroom class. With a casual heave he chucked the whole lot into the incinerator, watching fondly as they began to roast almost instantly. When the items turn up missing, that blonde horror will be the most suspicious, since he wasn't a gym class. The silver-haired instructor cackled, watching the pilfered loot go up in flames, and if they're never recovered they'll accuse him of pawning them off. He blinked as he noticed the pen he'd swiped from Iruka's desk laying on the floor. It was an old memento of the man's grandfather, and apparently one of a kind, with a leaf-like symbol on the clip. Didn't know Iruka was into antiques, he muttered, pocketing the pen and dusting off his hands. I'll keep it for now and pawn it off later on. After gym, Nendokyu's Shikamaru muttered, the Nara suppressing a yawn as he slowly trudged back to class, having dozed off not long after Guy and Naruto left. The rest of the class opting to leave him behind rather than waste time trying to wake him up. Not that I'm complaining about a little extra nap time, but the last thing I need is Iruka-sensei calling home because I skipped class. The sound of several raised voices caught his attention, the Nara pausing mid-yawn as he peered into the class, noting with interest that several of his classmates were routing through their belongings, literally turning their bags and desks upside down or accosting one another with wild accusations. What's with all the noise? He asked one of the nearby girls, only to mentally kick himself as she began to whine about her missing cell phone. Quickly distancing himself from the harpy before turning to face the class. Anyone with a lower decibel count, he pleaded, rubbing a finger in his ear. From the looks of things, someone snuck into the class during gym and went through everyone's stuff. Chaoji mumbled, Shikamaru turning to see his pudgy pal munching away at a packet of crisps, looking none the worse for wear, though that might be because the only thing he kept in his desk were snacks. And not even Oshima was stupid enough to try stealing one of the Akamichi's snacks again. They even swiped Iruka-sensei's pen, the one he got from his old man when he earned his teaching license. Shikamaru wondered, looking on in concern as Iruka rifled through his desk drawers furtively for the missing tool. Who'd want something like that? Yer Tebeo, Naruto muttered, the entire class pausing in their frantic searching as the blonde finally shuffled into class, looking a little flushed and a lot annoyed. Looks like it wasn't just fashion sense senpai got from Mega Brows and people call me a stamina monster. Naruto, Iruka called out, the blonde flinching at the sound of his caretaker's voice, turning round to see Iruka standing behind the desk, a nervous grin spreading across his features as he scratched the back of his head, wondering just how late he really was. Hey, sorry for being late, sensei, he offered, already trying to come up with an excuse that his caretaker would believe, only to trail off as he felt the wall of accusing stares from his fellow classmates. The hell you all looking at? My fly open or something? Now, calm down everyone, Iruka insisted, the instructor quickly stepping between his ward and the rest of the class, knowing all too well what was going through their minds and hoping to defuse the situation before someone did something to set off Naruto's temper. You're all being too quick to pass judgment here. But sensei, a girl called out, though she had the common sense to hide behind one of the boys, the poor nerd looking torn between his displeasure at being used as a human shield and his joy at finally having a girl touch him. He's the only one that wasn't there when gym ended, and he was only showed up after the bell had rung. What am I, chopped liver? Shikamaru muttered, drawing the attention of the rest of the class back to him. Not that I'm admitting to anything, but I was only a few seconds earlier than Naruto here, but I don't see anyone jumping to accuse me of theft. No offense, Nara-san, one of the other boys scoffed, making it all too clear he didn't care one whit. Of the lazy teen took offense, but the day you willingly exert the effort it'd take to swipe someone's stuff is the day pigs fly. All right now, that's enough, Iruka insisted, his tone brooking no argument, having noticed how Naruto's hair had become slightly spikier, a sure sign of vexation when the blonde's hair trigger was concerned. Everyone take your seats and pull out your notebooks, he ordered, watching as the class grudgingly obeyed before turning to Naruto with an apologetic expression. Naruto, sorry, but could you meet me in the staff room later? Staff room? I didn't steal anything, Naruto yelled, pounding the coffee table stubbornly, startling a secretary from her nap as he looked Iruka in the eyes. Come on, Iruka-sensei, I wasn't anywhere near the classroom when that stuff went missing. Then where were you? Mizuki drawled, the silver-haired instructor looming over the teen, his hands in the pockets of his expensive suit pants. No one could account for you halfway through gym class, and no one saw hide nor hair of you anywhere else. That's enough to let us know you skipped class. I already told you, Guy-sensei called me out during class to talk to me about what happened the other day. Naruto spat back, glaring up at the man, knowing from the smug, self-satisfied look on his ugly mug that the stuck-up prick was enjoying this way too much. Just ask Guy-sensei. He can vouch for me. We've tried, but it seems that Guy-sensei seems to have left the campus grounds. Iruka replied calmly, causing Naruto to sweat drop, wondering if the man was still looking for him. We've tried contacting him, but he has his phone off, which means that your little alibi's up in smoke. Mizuki opined, his tone like syrup gone bad, smirking down at the blonde with an infuriatingly smug look in his eyes, like a snake that thinks he's cornered a rat. So why don't you be a good little felon and confess? Now hold on there, Mizuki. Iruka cut in, eyeing his colleague sternly. I'll admit that while we can't account for his whereabouts, neither do we have any conclusive evidence to support the fact it was Naruto who stole from the class. You're letting your position as his caretaker cloud your judgment, Iruka, Mizuki chastised, sighing in mock exasperation as he pointed at Naruto with his thumb. Out of all the students who were late coming back to class, he had the most opportunity to do so, having apparently disappeared halfway through gym class. He waved a hand in the blonde's direction, and it isn't as if he isn't the type who'd do something like this. I mean, just look at him, trench coat, bleached hair, and those ridiculous markings on his face. He snorted, looking at the angered blonde mockingly. You think you're some kind of rebel. Not only that, but a little bird told me you've been hanging out around Yakuza joints recently. He scoffed, shrugging as he shook his head. Why Iruka wastes his time on a piece of trash like you is beyond me. If it were up to me, I'd have left you in the gutter where you belong. Now Naruto was the first to admit he had a bit of a temper. In fact, simply calling it a bit didn't do it justice. Growing up without your parents was never easy on a kid, even more when you lived in East Konoha, where even toddlers learned to swear before they learned how to walk. Before he'd made the acquaintance of Shikamaru and Choji, the only kids Naruto's age had been the kind like Oshima, who liked nothing more than to pick on those less fortunate than themselves. Naruto had dealt with the problem as most youths in his situation tend to do, by beating the living shit out of anyone who so much as looked at him funny. Much to Iruka's relief, the blonde had gotten better at controlling his temper as he got older, mainly thanks to the calming effect hanging with Choji and Shikamaru seemed to have on the boy, the two being about as laid back as one could get whilst remaining upright most of the time. However, there were still several big red do not push buttons that could set the blonde hellion off, and talking smack about his precious people, Iruka in particular, was one which few people ever made the mistake of pressing twice. And so it was that Iruka found himself leaping out of his chair scant seconds before Naruto leapt out of his, the scarred instructor moving to step between Mizuki and his charge as the boy lashed out at the man with a haymaker that would have sent Mizuki flying backwards into a wall, only to freeze as the door to the staff room slammed open. All right, a cranky old voice snapped, the occupants of the staff room turning to blink as the janitor stomped into the room, a garbage bag held in one hand, and an irate expression lining his soot-covered features. Which one of you whippersnappers tossed all this crap into the darn incinerator? The old fossil demanded, dumping the contents of the garbage bag, a pile of burnt notebooks, metal and plastic, onto the table. I told y'all not to touch it till I was done cleaning the darn thing out. He picked up a melted pencil case, and y'all know darn well that stuff like this ain't supposed to be chucked in there. Indeed it shouldn't, Mizuki noted, smirking at Naruto despite the cool sweat that adorned his brow at how close he'd come to having his lights punched out by the blonde. And the accusations just keep piling up, don't they? Theft, truancy, vandalism. He sneered at the teen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you just about to strike a teacher? He shook his head. Do you really need any more proof that this brat's guilty, Iruka? People have been expelled for less. Iruka's POV. Iruka grimaced, the scarred instructor glancing down at the pile of rubbish that had clearly, at one point, been notebooks, pencil cases, and even the odd mobile phone. As much as he'd like to deny it, as much as he held faith in Naruto's innocence, he had to admit that, with this much evidence leveled against him, things were looking pretty bad for his ward. I didn't do it, Naruto insisted, Iruka looking up to see the blonde looking him in the face, his blue eyes bereft of their usual stubbornness and energy, instead seeming to reach out to Iruka desperately, to try to make the man understand that there was no way he could have had any part in this. You gotta believe me, sensei, I didn't do this. Iruka wanted to believe it. He wanted to turn to Mizuki and call the man a liar. He wanted to scoop the boy up in his arms and hug him like he used to do when he was younger, let him know everything was going to be alright, that he'd sort everything out. But Naruto wasn't a child anymore, And Iruka, while the boy's caretaker, had his responsibilities as a teacher to consider as well. Before he could get his thoughts in order, however, the door to the staff room slammed open once more, the poor janitor crying out in alarm as he was sent sprawling across the floor as Madogai made his usual dramatic entrance. "Yasha!" the bowl-cut sporting coach bellowed, his beady eyes glinting triumphantly as he spotted Naruto standing before him. "It seems my youthful students were telling the truth," he proclaimed, pointing dramatically at the blonde. "You may have managed to give me the slip before, Naruto-kun, but there will be no escaping your youthful punishment this time." "Guy-sensei," Iruka called out, wincing as the man's voice echoed into the distant horizon. "And beyond as happy as I am to see you, would you mind toning it down a bit? We're in the middle of a meeting right now." Iruka-sensei," Guy muttered, as if only noticing the scarred teacher for the first time, Lee's caretaker blinking as he took in his surroundings, noting the exasperated and annoyed looks of his colleagues, Mizuki in particular with some confusion. "What's been going on here?" "Uzumaki's been caught stealing people's property and using the incinerator to destroy them," Mizuki spoke up, cutting off Iruka before the man could speak, smirking at Naruto, and the blonde's hackles raised. "We believe he did it when he skipped out halfway through gym." "Skipped?" Guy repeated, blinking at the silver-haired teacher in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Naruto was with me during the second half of gym," he countered, earning a look of shock from the staff and a scowl from Mizuki. "I was worried about his health after the accident the other day, so I took him aside for a chat. And this chat lasted until the end of gym," Mizuki asked snidely, though on the inside he was beginning to sweat. "Damn it," he swore, grinding his teeth in frustration as he glared at the male coach venomously. "Why'd this freak have to show up?" "Oh no, we finished up about halfway before the end," Guy countered, Mizuki's grin returning full force. "But after that I tried to talk to him about his fights with the gangs and he ran off." He eyed the blonde with a mixture of amusement and pride. "I ended up chasing him all over the school. Almost gave me the slip too. After circling the building a few times, I led Guy-sensei back to the track field a few times before giving him the slip," Naruto added, grinning at how the energetic coach had continued to run in a circle, kicking up clouds of dust in the process. "By that point I noticed how late I was, so I hauled ass back to the gym to get changed before making my way back to the classroom." "So you didn't steal them?" Iruka sighed, a look of relief crossing his features as he sank back into his chair, missing the look of impotent fury on Mizuki's face as he gazed up at his ward, who merely snorted in annoyance. "Like hell I would," Naruto muttered, eyeing the pile of burnt trash on the table as if it had personally insulted him. "Why in the hell would I want to steal a pile of cheap crap I can buy at the bookstore? And what kinda retard burns a mobile phone?" he demanded. "I'm no pickpocket, but even preschoolers know those things sell like hotcakes at the pawn shops downtown." "That isn't something you should admit to during a testimony," Iruka sighed, shaking his head in exasperation as he got to his feet. "In any case, it seems we owe you an apology, Naruto." He turned to Mizuki with a smile. "Isn't that right, Mizuki-sensei?" Mizuki's POV. "So it would seem." Mizuki managed to grit out through his teeth, the silver-haired instructor inclining his head towards Naruto in lieu of shaking the punk's hand, turning on his heel and marching towards the door as the rest of the faculty crowded round to offer their apologies. "Damn it," he cursed, glaring at Guy's back as the coach laughed uproariously at some comment he'd made. "If only that Bruce Lee wannabe hadn't shown up I'd have." "Hold it right there," Naruto barked, Mizuki flinching, turning in the doorway to find the blonde hellion pointing at him accusingly. "Where you scurrying off to? I think you've got some explaining of your own to do, Mizuki-sensei." "Me?" Mizuki repeated, the instructor gaping at the teen, though it slowly turned into a sneer as his shock gave way to his usual confidence. "What could I possibly have to explain? Surely you're not accusing me of stealing from my own students." "I never said nothing about stealing," Naruto countered, his blue eyes narrowing with suspicion even as Mizuki flinched at his little slip. "Though I noticed you flinch when I called whoever burned those cell phones a retard. Seemed to take it rather personal from what I could tell." "This is ridiculous," Mizuki scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief to cover up his shock at how sharp the boy's eyes were. "I don't have time for this. Iruka, I suggest you get that boy to a counselor. He's delusional." "Hey, old man," Naruto called out, addressing the janitor, who had been otherwise ignored up until now, simply sitting back to watch the courtroom drama he'd unwittingly stumbled into from the sidelines. Though the blonde's eyes never left Mizuki's face. "That furnace of yours gives off a lot of soot, doesn't it?" "Sure does," the old fossil confirmed, nodding his head as he wiped at his face with an equally sooty handkerchief. "I got the stains to prove it. The darn thing's as old as this school, Probably older, and it's a bitch to clean the closer we get to winter too. He glared at the secretary. I was told we'd be getting a new one and soon. Mind you, that was last year. A machine as old and dirty as that means just going near it can leave a trail of soot on you, can't it? Naruto asked, his features never shifting even as Mizuki fought to suppress a flinch. Must be murder on your dry cleaning bill. It is at that. The janitor agreed, nodding his head solemnly, glad to finally have someone on his side as he glared balefully at the rest of the staff in their nice, clean, pristine clothes. Darn things spits up soot and dust like there's no tomorrow. That can't be good for your health, Naruto opined, reaching up with his free hand to tap the side of his nose. I heard a rumor that inhaling soot from an incinerator causes a vein to rise up on your nose. Oh, that's a lie, the janitor countered, waving a soot-stained hand dismissively. Oh, you'll cough up a lung or two, for certain. But I've been cleaning the darn things for years and I've never seen anything like that. You really shouldn't pay any mind to tall tales, lad. You're right, I was lying, Naruto agreed, smirking like the cat that caught the cream as he pointed at Mizuki, who was too slow lowering his hand from checking his nose to avoid being noticed. But this liar just bagged himself an idiot. Mizuki flinched, glaring at the cocky blonde, noting the looks of suspicion he was getting from his colleagues. What are you all looking at? He snapped. You're going to trust the word of this punk over me. Punk I may be, Naruto admitted dismissively, but even I know the difference between right and wrong. He shrugged, shaking his head. I've put my share of idiots in hospital, and I've driven off more blowhard instructors who thought they were all that. He snickered. Heck, half the East Side gangs are scared shitless of me. Again, not something you should be proud of, Iruka opined, a deadpan expression on his face that earned a sweat drop from the gathered crowd, Naruto ignoring his caretaker's statement, for the most part, as he glared at Mizuki, anger coming off him in waves, causing a few instructors to take fearful steps back. But there's one thing I've never done, Naruto growled, pointing at Mizuki accusingly, and that set someone up to take the rap for something I did. And that's what you tried to do, Mizuki-sensei. Got any proof there, little boy? Mizuki demanded, smirking at the blonde as he stood with his arms held wide, as if to prove his innocence. You can't prove I stole anything, can you? Didn't you stop to wonder why I brought the soot up? Naruto pressed, a smirk of his own in place. No doubt you would have washed your hands after dumping the goods, just in case any soot did turn up later. He pointed at the teacher. But you forgot one important thing, Mizuki-sensei, and that's your coat. Mizuki flinched, as the looks of suspicion flicked back to him, wondering how the hell he'd gotten into this mess. I gotta admit, sensei, that while you always came off as a sleaze, you were at least a well-dressed sleaze, Naruto complimented, looking the man's suit up and down with grudging approval. A man that takes so much pride in his appearance like you do probably went to great pains to make sure not a single particle of soot touched your suit. You probably took the coat off while you were in the incinerator room, and washed your hands and face before putting it back on. He smirked at the man. But you forgot the soot stains you left on your lapel, which you put there when you took it off. Not only that, but there's some soot lining your coat pocket. Care to show us what's in there, sensei? Mizuki grimaced as the blonde's comment caused several mutters to rise up from the assembled staff, the silver-haired teacher backing up towards the door, only to choke as a slender, yet strong arm wrapped around his neck in a stranglehold. Going somewhere? Anko asked, the female coach smirking coyly at the crooked instructor as he struggled futilely in her grip. You wouldn't be planning to run out on us when things were just starting to heat up, would you? You bitch. Mizuki swore, unable to do anything more than struggle futilely in the woman's chokehold, the crooked instructor's eyes widening in alarm as she reached into his pocket and pulled out Iruka's missing pen for all to see. Well, would you look at that, Anko noted, whistling appreciatively as she twirled the purloined pen between her fingers like a baton. If it isn't Iruka's pen. She eyed her captive with a coy, yet dangerous smirk. Now how do you suppose that got there? Iruka looked from the pen to Mizuki, confusion, hurt, and disappointment marring his features, before turning to Naruto with a sigh. Naruto, you're free to go, he informed the teen, before turning to the stunned secretary with a resigned air. Call the police. Later, what happened next would be the basis of much gossip for a while to come. News of Mizuki's dismissal and arrest for attempted framing of a student spread quickly, and by the time the police arrived a vast crowd had gathered to jeer at the man as he was escorted off school grounds by two serious-looking officers. The disgraced teacher screaming obscenities at the crowd whilst fighting with his captors all the way down the courtyard. In a way, it was almost karmic to see the stuck-up, conniving educator get his comeuppance for all the posturing, preaching, belittling he dished out towards those unfortunate enough to catch his eye. Some of his more frequent victims were even hurling cans and garbage at the man, to the point that by the time he reached the school gates, his once immaculate appearance was completely ruined. Naruto, wanting the best seat in the house to watch the proceedings, had opted to lean against the school gates, the blonde hellion watching with smug satisfaction as the police frog marched an irate Mizuki to the waiting cruiser, waving mockingly in farewell when their eyes crossed. Mizuki's eyes, which were already crazed from the treatment he was receiving, widened dangerously at the sight of the one responsible for his current predicament, the enraged crook lashing out with his elbow, catching the cop on his right in the gut, stealing his pistol and using it to club his partner across the face before he could get his stun gun out of its holster. "You!" the deranged teacher shrieked, spinning round to point the weapon at Naruto, determined to take the little shit down with him, grinning as the blonde's eyes widened in shock as the hammer fell. "I'll take you with me." Naruto blinked, his eyes widening as everything seemed to slow down around him, the sounds fading away, becoming hollow, distant, whole, the color dimmed as if someone was screwing with the tone on the television. His vision tunneling towards the hole at the end of the gun barrel, somehow managing to see the little lead slug that was just waiting to fly from its nest and bury itself in his face. This is it, he realized, in that detached, understanding way that one does moments before their death. There's no way I'm gonna dodge this. He tried to look up at Mizuki, but his vision was fixed on the bullet as the hammer ignited the powder, sending the little metal slug speeding down the barrel of the revolver in slow motion, the air around the barrel distorting as it flew out towards him. I wonder if being shot hurts more than being run over. He wondered morbidly, only to stiffen as the memory of the cold, barren darkness seeped into his bones. F that. Even as reality began to reassert itself, the sound of the gunshot registering in the minds of everyone around him. Naruto was already moving, the bullet, which had been aimed right at his face, skimming past his brow to embed itself in the wall he'd been leaning on as he lunged towards Mizuki at a dead run. The madman reeling back in shock at the move, only to level his purloined weapon at the charging blonde once more. "Not this time, shithead," Naruto roared, ducking under the gun, a semi-transparent arm lashing out and smashing the weapon, and Mizuki's hand, to pieces as the Hurricane King got right in the screaming madman's face before letting rip with a flurry of punches, barely noticing that he seemed to have twice as many fists as normal. Muta. Mizuki went flying backwards, his face a bloody, pulped mess as he rammed into the police cruiser, bounced off, and scraped along the ground, only to come to a halt against a fire hydrant. A passing dog, which had been about to utilize said hydrant, chose to switch its target to Mizuki, relieving itself on the man's head while Naruto caught his breath, teeth clenched tightly as he glared at the former instructor in disgust. Behind the teen hovered a large, muscular figure covered in orange and red armor with drill-like ridges on the gauntlets. On its head was a helmet topped with spiky red hair, the mouth guard designed to resemble a fanged mouth. The Roman numerals IX adorned the shoulder joints of both arms, and whirlpool crest adorned the back of its fists. "I don't know what the hell's going on," Naruto muttered, raising an arm and watching as the specter apparently followed his example, the blonde smirking as the two of them clenched their fists in tandem. "But I sure as hell like it." Meanwhile, while the authorities escorted the unconscious Mizuki away, Rock Lee eyed Naruto from behind a corner, watching as the stunned crowd flocked to the blonde, some worried about the gunshot and others praising him for finishing off Mizuki. "So Naruto-kun has won too," he deduced, eyeing his friend and underclassman with understanding. The sound of rustling of bandages filling the air. "Things are certainly getting interesting around here." So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author kyugan on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.